He humiliated me in front of everyone, but I got back up and discovered my true strength. There was an invisible weight I carried with me every day, something I couldn't name at first. It was like walking through an open field, but feeling like each step was sinking me into the sand. Things seemed simple to the outside world. I had a relationship, a routine, friends, a job, but inside, it was different. Every gesture from Enrique, every sarcastic comment, undermined my confidence so subtly that it took me a long time to notice. His smile hid a coldness I couldn't face. Little by little, I realized that my happiness depended on his approval. If he was angry, my day fell apart. If he complimented me, I felt like I was floating. I began to isolate myself, not by choice, but out of fear, afraid to speak, afraid to exist, afraid of provoking another harsh comment. And I, who had always been a dreamer and patient, believed that love meant enduring, forgiving, waiting, until each small humiliation began to pile up like heavy stones on my shoulders. I didn't realize that with each joke or criticism, Enrique was carving out a version of me I didn't recognize. I wondered, am I weak? Am I overreacting? My heart wanted to believe everything could be fixed with patience. But the truth was, I was disappearing into a relationship that promised love and delivered pain. The confusion between affection and control blinded me, and no matter how much Natalia tried to warn me, I closed my ears, convinced I could change Enrique if I just tried harder. It was then that an unexpected situation brought me the clarity I needed. A dinner with his friends, a setting that had previously seemed safe, became a stage for my humiliation. Enrique, with his condescending smile, began to belittle me in front of everyone, mocking my appearance, criticizing my appearance, my speech, my smile. With each word, I felt my body shrink, as if I were disappearing in front of those I considered friends. He, arrogant and vain, seemed to feed on my discomfort, and I, unable to react, felt smaller than ever. The height of humiliation came when he called me ugly and left me alone with the bill, laughing with friends. It was as if every drop of self-respect had been drained in seconds. I left that dinner feeling like I had lost not only my dignity, but also my faith in myself. Tears flowed silently on the way home, and I wondered how I had allowed someone to have so much power over my self-esteem. At that moment, I realized I needed a radical change. I could no longer continue being held hostage by someone who said they loved me, but only managed to diminish the person who was by their side. My name is Livia, and this story took place in early 2023, when I was 28 and working at a digital marketing agency. Before this turning point, my life seemed organized. I had friends, a promising career, and a relationship I believed was stable. But internally, everything was unstable. Each day became a silent battle. I constantly sacrificed myself, trying to please Enrique, believing that if I did everything right, his love would be guaranteed. This relentless pursuit of his approval became an exhausting routine. I began to neglect my own happiness, ignoring warning signs, isolating myself from Natalia, who always tried to show me he wasn't the right man. Celeste, my mother, on the other hand, always reinforced that men were just like that criticism and humiliation were part of a relationship, and that patience and forgiveness were feminine virtues. I grew up with this idea, but now I felt like I was about to break with everything I knew. The feeling of failure consumed me. Every morning, I woke with a knot in my stomach, anticipating the next situation in which Enrique would find reasons to belittle me. At work, I tried to maintain my composure, but I often left for the bathroom to control the urge to cry. It was a cycle of pain, silence, and fear. I began to question my own perception. Was I really so insignificant? Why couldn't I free myself? Doubt gnawed at my mind, and even though Eduardo, my coworker, was kind and attentive, showing me that there were people who respected and valued my presence, I felt incapable of leaving the relationship that was destroying me. The idea of walking away seemed impossible. The feelings of guilt and hope held me captive, as if love were sufficient justification for the suffering. In the days following the dinner, I experienced a mixture of profound sadness and pent-up anger. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The reflection seemed weak, submissive, someone who lacked the courage to fight for herself. That's when I realized that this pain needed to be channeled, that something inside me needed to awaken. I began writing, recording my feelings, my fears, And little by little, this practice helped me understand that my happiness couldn't depend on another person. Writing became an outlet, a safe space where I could be honest with myself, admitting the truth I'd previously denied. Henrique wouldn't change, and I couldn't continue sacrificing myself for a toxic relationship. In the months that followed, I began to notice small changes in myself. It wasn't immediate, nor was it magical. At first, I simply allowed myself to cry without guilt, to feel anger without blaming myself for it, to write letters I never sent, but which helped me release everything Henrique had buried inside me. Each written word was a step toward the freedom I didn't even know I needed. I began to rediscover small pleasures I had abandoned, reading my favorite books, walking alone in the park, listening to music that made me vibrate. It was in this process that Eduardo became more present, not in an invasive way, but as someone who reminded me that kindness and attention were possible without pain. He never tried to save me, never told me to abandon Henrique. He simply showed me that respect existed and that I deserved it. This realization gave me strength, but also brought fear. Could I break away for good? The fear of facing loneliness, of losing what I knew, was still great, but it began to diminish compared to the desire to find myself again. Every step, no matter how small, brought me closer to something I hadn't felt in a long time, my own worth. It was then that Henrique tried to approach, stealthily, as if nothing had happened. He laughed, mocked, and tried to manipulate the situation with charm, trying to show that he was still in control. But something in me had changed. It wasn't just a matter of pride or revenge. It was dignity. For the first time, I realized that my presence didn't need to be justified or accepted by him for me to feel complete. The feeling was liberating, but also frightening. The tension that once consumed me daily now transformed into clarity. Every provocation he made, every attempt to humiliate me, was met with a firm silence and a smile that didn't hide insecurity. I didn't seek revenge because I realized that overcoming didn't need external justification. The true victory was mine. Henrique, with all his arrogance, no longer had the power to affect my emotional balance. I, who had once been shaped by fear, now breathed freedom. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother and Celeste gradually changed. Old patterns still lingered, and she kept repeating that men are just like that, but my perspective had shifted. I no longer had to accept the minimization of who I was. Celeste began to realize, little by little, that my choices were making me stronger. Natalia became closer again, and our friendship, which had been shaken by my isolation, was rebuilt on a more solid foundation. This support network was essential, showing me that I wasn't alone, that love and respect were possible in healthy relationships, and that I no longer needed to seek approval from those who only offered criticism. During this period, I faced moments of intense doubt. The urge to give in to nostalgia, to believe that perhaps Henrique had changed, came in unexpected waves. Sometimes it seemed easier to give in to what I knew than to face the uncertainty of autonomy. But every time I remembered the dinner, the harsh words, the public embarrassment, I felt a knot in my stomach that told me, never again. And then, I found strength in my own story, in my silent resistance, in the pride of having emotionally survived what seemed unbearable. The rebuilding process was not linear. There were days when emotional setbacks appeared, but each time I managed to get back up faster, stronger, more aware of my worth. Work also became a space for redemption. Every project delivered, every compliment received, every healthy interaction with colleagues like Eduardo reinforced that I was capable and worthy of respect. My confidence grew gradually but steadily. I began to realize that I no longer needed to apologize for existing or for wanting to be happy. Henrique, who had previously dictated my self-esteem, now became just a reminder of what I had overcome. My life was changing, and the change was visible not only to me, but to everyone around me. What had once been pain became motivation, and the rebuilding of my self-esteem began to overflow into every aspect of my daily life, showing me that I could exist by myself and for myself, without depending on anyone's approval. Little by little, I rediscovered who I truly was. I looked in the mirror and recognized someone who didn't depend on Henrique's gaze to feel whole. Every gesture, from making my own breakfast, organizing my routine, to going for a walk without a destination, became an act of affirmation. I existed for myself, not for him. It wasn't easy. Insecurity still surfaced in unexpected moments, like memories of past criticism or images of the humiliating dinner. But now I could take a deep breath, acknowledge my fear, and decide to move forward anyway. Eduardo, with his discreet presence, showed me that kindness was a life choice and that healthy relationships didn't need pain to exist. This contrast between Enrique and Eduardo became a point of reflection for me. I realized that love doesn't hurt, doesn't diminish, doesn't humiliate. This insight, though painful, was liberating. I began practicing affirmations, writing down my daily victories, and even allowing myself to laugh at small situations without guilt. Life stopped, being a daily battle, and became a conscious construction in which I was responsible for my well-being. When I ran into Enrique again at work, I felt a mix of curiosity and serenity. He'd tried that old strategy of charm and irony, hoping to provoke or impress me, but I was different. It wasn't arrogance or revenge, it was dignity. He realized in the first instant that he wouldn't affect me anymore, and perhaps he felt a kind of silent frustration, something he'd provoked in me before. Every provocation from him was met with neutrality. Every ironic smile was met with a calm I'd never felt before. The feeling of being able to be present in the same room without fear or anxiety was liberating. I understood that true revenge doesn't have to be revenge or humiliation. Overcoming obstacles in itself is the most elegant blow. My silence, my confident gaze, my serene posture demonstrated that life was moving on and that I was rebuilt, stronger than before. The feeling of reclaiming my space, my body, my mind was indescribable. My relationship with my mother and Celeste also underwent changes. Although she still repeated old phrases about men, I now listened without flinching. Celeste began to notice my changes, my firmness, and gradually began to see me as someone capable of making decisions for myself. Natalia became a constant presence again, in meetings, conversations, and even in moments of shared silence. This rebuilding of bonds was as important as the internal rebuilding. I realized that I didn't need to walk alone, but also that I couldn't depend on anyone to feel whole. This realization further strengthened my self-esteem. During this period, I faced moments when doubt tried to creep back in. Memories of difficult days, past messages, and small reminders of Enrique's manipulative charm surfaced to test my strength. But each time these memories surfaced, I took a deep breath, leaned on my own limits and choices, and moved forward. I learned that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting or eliminating the pain completely, but rather learning to live with it without letting it control my life. With each day, my smile became more genuine, my posture firmer, and my sense of freedom more concrete. Work, once merely a routine, became a space for affirmation and growth. Projects I delivered with dedication and creativity were recognized. Sincere praise from colleagues reminded me that I deserved respect, and healthy interactions reinforced that. Being valued wasn't a privilege, but a right. My confidence grew through small daily gestures, making decisions for myself, dressing how I wanted, speaking my mind without fear, laughing at my own flaws. Each achievement, no matter how small, was a step toward rebuilding who I truly was. Enrique, who once defined my worth, now had no place in my self-esteem. I was whole, strong, and aware that my self-esteem didn't need anyone to validate it. Over time, I realized that my life didn't need to revolve around other people's approval. Every achievement, every gesture of autonomy was a reminder that I no longer depended on anyone to feel worthy. The feeling of freedom was so intense that even small everyday situations took on a new flavor. Choosing what to wear without worrying about criticism, deciding to go out alone for a walk, laughing at myself without guilt. What had once been a terrain of fear and submission now became a safe space. My space. Enrique, with all his arrogance, became just a shadow of the past, a memory that reminded me of how much I had grown. I learned that I didn't need revenge or answers. My own respect was enough. This internal transformation was reflected in every aspect of my life, from my work to my personal relationships. I realized that I could exist on my own, that happiness didn't need anyone's permission. The reunion with Enrique, however, was decisive. He seemed to be trying to regain control, with that ironic smile and provocative comments. But now I was serene, calm, and confident. Every provocation he made was met with neutrality. My silence and dignified posture showed more than any words could express. He immediately realized I wouldn't be affected. For the first time, I felt my emotional freedom was unbreakable. I didn't seek to humiliate him or seek revenge. I simply demonstrated, with my presence and confidence, that overcoming obstacles is the most elegant revenge. That moment was liberating, as I realized I no longer needed to depend on external approval or live in fear. My victory lay in my internal transformation. My relationship with my mother also evolved. Celeste began to realize that her advice, often based on conformity, wouldn't define my life. She began to recognize my strength, my decision-making ability, and to respect my choices. Natalia, who had long remained distant, became a constant presence again, offering non-judgmental support. This strengthening of bonds was essential, showing me that healthy relationships exist and that we don't need to accept those who diminish our worth. I learned the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly care about us and who respect our choices and boundaries. Rebuilding my self-esteem didn't happen immediately. There were days of setbacks, doubts, and painful memories. But each time these situations arose, I took a breath, reflected on my journey, and chose to stay strong. Every small victory, from a compliment at work to the simple act of walking down the street with confidence, was celebrated. I realized that overcoming doesn't mean erasing the pain, but learning to live with it without it controlling us. This realization changed my life. Each step toward emotional independence strengthened my self-love and self-confidence. Today I look back and see how much I've grown. What was once suffering and humiliation has become learning and strength. I'm not completely free from painful memories, but I've learned to deal with them without them defining who I am. Henrique, who once dictated my worth, is now just part of my past. My present is built on respect, self-love, and autonomy. I've learned that true power lies not in diminishing others, but in elevating oneself through one's own dignity. This is the most precious freedom I've achieved. From that moment on, my life took on different colors. Before, I lived in gray tones, shaped by Henrique's judgment and criticism. Every decision, every step, had to pass through his filter. Today, my choices are my own, and what I feel is valued by myself, not by someone who wants to diminish me. Work, friends, routine. Everything is now built with my own energy, and no longer under the weight of someone who made me feel small. I discovered that happiness is not a distant concept or dependent on someone else. It is built daily, with simple, conscious actions. This change brought me serenity and courage to move forward, not looking back with regrets, but with learning. My relationship with Eduardo, which had previously been one of warmth and support, grew stronger. He wasn't just a kind colleague. He became a symbol that healthy relationships exist, that respect doesn't have to be accompanied by pain or manipulation. Living with people like him made me realize that there's a world of possibilities, where love and friendship are reciprocal, not a tool of control. Every conversation, every gesture of care, reinforced the certainty that I deserved more than passivity and humiliation. I learned to appreciate these small signs of respect and to build a life around them. I found new strength within myself, a confidence that had previously been lacking. I was able to look at Henrique without fear, without anxiety, without the need to prove myself. He became merely a reminder of who I was, not who I am. My transformation was both practical and emotional. I changed my routine, my posture, my worldview. The freedom I experienced was not just an absence of humiliation, but a complete reconstruction of my self-esteem. I realized that true overcoming doesn't need external applause. It happens within every conscious decision, in every moment of silent resistance, in every smile that becomes genuine again. Today, I can say I've learned something fundamental. Dignity and self-love are the greatest rewards anyone can achieve. I don't need to prove anything to Henrique, nor seek revenge. My victory lies in my reconstruction, in my ability to put myself first without guilt, in my emotional freedom. Every challenge I've faced, every tear, every fear, has been transformed into strength. I've realized that life is much richer when built on self-respect, not on the approval of those who diminish others. This awareness allows me to live fully, without losing myself again, and with the certainty that I can face any situation while maintaining my integrity. Looking back, I recognize that my pain was real, but also necessary. Without it, I might not have awakened the strength that existed within me. Today, I feel gratitude for every obstacle, for every moment of doubt, for every silent tear, because they all taught me that I can be whole, strong, and happy in my own skin. Henrique is no longer a presence that defines my self-esteem. He has become merely a reminder of overcoming. The present is mine, built with respect, self-love, and courage. And life, finally, became light, possible, and mine to live fully.